Score-optional colleges are score-optional the same way that getting your mother a present for Mother's Day is optional. You don't have to do it, but you probably should. Now, I wish that there was a way for schools to totally ignore the SAT and the ACT, because even though I teach them for a living, I think they're pretty irrelevant, ridiculous exams. Unfortunately, score-optional colleges are not the fix that some people believe them to be. And what it comes down to is the reason why they become score-optional. Now, it would be really nice if this was sort of a charitable motion, right? They said, look, these tests are totally ridiculous. They're outdated. We're not going to use them anymore. We want to see who you really are. Unfortunately, that's really not what happens. The reason that colleges are going score optional is because when they go score optional, they get more applicants, right? So suddenly, because they're score optional, people who would never otherwise apply think they might have a shot of getting in. And one of the main things in schools' rankings is how many kids apply versus how many kids do you let in. Also, it gets even weirder because score-optional colleges end up having higher average SAT and ACT scores. And at first, this might seem like a paradox. How does that make any sense? But think about it for a moment. If you have bad SAT scores, you'll apply to a score-optional college and you just won't submit them. But if you have great scores, you will. So what happens is that these colleges get a massive pool of kids who have bad scores and don't submit them, and then a very small pool of kids who have incredible scores and do. So now they have the best of both worlds. Suddenly, they have these incredible scores from these kids who do submit them, so their average scores go up, which also increases rankings, and they have this huge swath of kids who don't submit their scores, and they can cherry pick all of these amazing athletes and otherwise hyper-recruitable people who might have never otherwise applied because they thought their scores would keep them out. So suddenly, you have this change in the perspective. You thought that score optional meant, oh my gosh, they're being so generous, I don't need to submit an SAT score. Now you realize that they're actually just trying to get more applicants, raise their statistics, and get a better pool of kids that they can pull in, thanks to the overweight of all the kids who have really high scores. So at the end of the day, there are three things you can do about score-optional colleges. One, get high scores anyway, start studying early. That's what you should do in the first place. Two, realize that if you apply there, it's not improving your chances of getting in, it's actually reducing them because you're competing against a much larger number of kids who have low scores as well. Or lower your standards. If you think you can have low scores and get into a super competitive college just because it's become score optional, that's not the case anymore. So I hate to kind of burst this bubble. I wish I wasn't the bearer of bad news, but at the end of the day, score optional colleges really aren't the great news that they sort of pretend to be.